Hello again. I want to think today about a rather puzzling state of affairs has arisen, which is that the overall number of people dying in Britain has for the last 3 weeks been falling below average for the time of year. This is not, of course, my own opinion. I give a link in the description to this video to the latest figures released by the Office for National Statistics. I am, of course, talking here about all deaths, not merely those relating to contagious diseases. Before going any further, let me make it perfectly plain that I am not contradicting anything said either by the World Health Organization, nor the British government or the National Health Service of that country. I am speculating about the possible reason for the figures which the government has released and are now in the public domain. Every week, in the usual way of things, about 10,000 people in Britain die of one cause or another. This sounds an awful lot, but it's about average. In total, something over 500,000 people a year die in the United Kingdom, and that figure's unlikely to change in the immediate future. There cannot be the least doubt, though, that far more than the usual 500,000 people have died over the course of the last year in Britain. Over 100,000 more than average. This state-of-the-art graphic illustrates schematically this situation. I've greatly simplified the curve, and I'm aware that it's a lot more wiggly than this really, but this will give the general idea. Yeah? It shows from April 2020 to April this year, where we are now, and you can see the 5-year average compared with the actual number of deaths. I doubt if anybody will disagree with anything which I have so far said. The great majority of those extra deaths were people with underlying health problems, or who were very old, or in very many cases, both very old and with underlying health problems. In other words, both states of affairs. They were both old and ill. This much seems certain. Typically, an 82-year-old man who was morbidly obese perhaps and had something like chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder or congestive heart failure would be the kind of person we're looking at here. In the usual way of things, this man's life expectancy might typically be only another year or two of life. And instead of living another 18 months, he died instead in the last year. There are, of course, exceptions to this trend. There have been young people dying, but I'm talking now of typical cases amongst those I showed in this chart. Okay, let's just have a look at this again. Most of those deaths are in people with underlying health conditions, or who are old, or who are both very old and have underlying health conditions. What is now happening is interesting, but not altogether unexpected. Instead of the number of deaths being above average, as it has been for the last year or so, it has now fallen below the 5-year average, as we can see in this second chart. Yeah? We can see that the deaths have risen over the last year, April 2020 to April 21, and now they're going down. Now, so far, again, nothing which has been said is open to question. This is according to the latest government statistics and figures from the National Health Service, what has happened up to now. For the last year or so, the rate of deaths was very much above average, and now it's declined and fallen below the 5-year average. The only real question is what will happen in the coming year. The answer to that question, of course, is that nobody knows. It may be, as some people fear, that what will happen with the easing of the lockdown, which is due to begin next week and continue for a couple of months, that the number of deaths will start to rise again and go above the average. Here, let me mark in that possibility on this chart. This is what some people are worried will happen, that having gone down, now the deaths will go up again. Let me just show you what I've done there. Okay, here's where we are now at the bottom there, but perhaps with the lockdown being eased, the death rate will go up again. That's certainly one possibility. There is another though, and it could be this. It may be that the number of deaths in Britain will continue dipping below average over the next year, which could give us a chart which looks like this. The implications for this sequence of events would be quite curious, because the two abnormal years would then tend to cancel each other out, and you might find that the total deaths over the 2 years were in line with the 5-year average. In other words, you would have had a year of deaths above the average and a year of deaths below the average. I have no idea, and neither does anybody else, if that is what will actually happen. There is some reason, though, to think that it is a distinct possibility. A very large number of the extra deaths which we have seen over the last year have been, as I said, among very old people with one or more health problems. People in their 80s with, say, diabetes and heart problems. Again, this is not my opinion, but what the figures from hospitals and the government show. The life expectancy of those people are much lower than average. Often only a year or two of life is predicted to be left in them. So, some of these people have not died in the last year. If they hadn't died in the last year, then we might reasonably expect them to die in the coming year or two. We're not seeing their deaths in the current figures, because obviously they have already died. A large number of people who might, all else being equal, have died in the coming year will not now do so, because they are already dead. They died in the last year when the deaths were above average. It is this which is depressing the death rate at the moment, and the only real question is how long this effect will last and how pronounced it is likely to be. There are certainly some intriguing implications should the fall in the death rate continue for long. It would be very strange if, taken over 2 or 3 years, the death rate in Britain ended up, for the reasons at which I've been looking, exactly in line with the 5-year average. The Office for National Statistics release their weekly figures every Tuesday morning, and I encourage viewers to keep an eye out for them. I cannot help but notice that newspapers and television broadcasters don't seem all that keen on reporting those raw data. And since they are the official figures produced by the register offices across the country and forwarded to London each week, it's worth reading them rather than seeing what newspapers say about them.